So you are a senior partner and co-head of people and organizational performance practice at McKinsey and Company, and most recently the author of The Journey to Leadership. So maybe to set the stage, what makes a great leader?
Wow, this is the whole book. We have a whole book to talk about. Maybe I share why we wrote this book, which will set the stage to what a great leader is. I think, unfortunately or fortunately, the world is very, very complex. This is the first time that we have 5 generations in the workplace. Everything is changing super, super quickly. Inflation is a context that many leaders do not know. After COVID and everything that is happening in the world, people are seeking purpose. And so it was obvious that the command and control style of leadership that might have applied years ago, that being an expert in something and leading through your knowledge is just not sufficient. And so based on everything that we have done and learned, we realized that actually amazing leadership starts with the individual being very conscious, being aware of the tensions that live within them and the fact that they're very unique in their position and helping others navigate through competing demands, which brings us to the first part of great leadership, which is being able to lead yourself, and then you can excite and lead others. And that requires some traits that are obvious, like being confident and resilient and versatile, but it also means being humble and empathetic. And it also means that you need to be able to make bold decisions and instill purpose in other people, invite truth speaking, empower, and through that create a very different energy. So a very complex formula of what it takes to be a great leader these days.
Yeah, so we're going to unpack the ingredients in that formula. And you mentioned in the journey of leadership, you and your co-authors, what I like about kind of, especially the early chapters, you emphasize a human-centric approach to leadership, which I think kind of what you mentioned is really contrasts to the command and conquer style of what we've seen, command and control, style of leadership that you mentioned. So could you explain what this means in practical terms to be a human-centric leader?
Yes. And of course, when you lay the challenge to be a human-centered leader, most people say, but I am human, which is true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, well, I have all those things that I need to deliver. What do you want me to do? I just need to put my head down and start working. So being a human leader means listening to others. So because you need to admit that you do not have all the answers. You probably have a very unique vantage point, but listen to others. It means being humble and also knowing when you are wrong and having the courage to admit that you're wrong. And it means being able to know with a versatility when to be what. When do I speak? When do I listen? When do I follow? When do I lead? When do I push people? When do I support people? And so that mastery of that dance is really what human-centered leadership is all about. And it's anchored in, first of all, you and your ability to know yourself and understand what it means for you and what it takes for you to be a professional, hard-charging, high-achieving, human-centered leader.
Okay, that's great. And, let's deep dive maybe into kind of those traits that you're discussing, because, it is pretty complex. We live in a pretty complex economy today. The challenges organizations face and leaders face are very complex, and it requires, that new formula of being a leader. And I think, one thing that you mentioned, which is kind of a core tenet, and kind of you echoed that in your discussion here, is the need to listen and to not always need to be the best or the expert in the room, right? And to rely on other experts in the room. And I think there's a misconception among leaders that they need to be the best in the team. They need to be the ones who have all the answers. But that's not necessarily the case, right? Because a good team, a high-performing team, is a team where everyone has, a distinct advantage. So maybe walk us through why leaders think that why this misconception still exists today and in today's economy, and how can leaders internalize the concept that they don't need to be the expert in the room always better. So yeah, I'd love some examples, kind of references that you've had in the books as well. Walk us through that problem set.
Wise, because many of us grew up that way. We were experts in our field. We were the best engineer on the team, and we knew how to code, and then we can teach others how to code, and then we could lead a whole project and design and engineer that. Or we were the best banker in the room, and we really get all those intricacies of financial complexities. And it is important. You need to be fluent in the language of your industry, and you need to know what you're doing. But even nowadays with Gen AI, right, do you really need to be the one who's teaching your coders how to code? The system can do that. You bring a very different value to the table. You are there to identify what are the needs are, to serve people. And so one of the My favorite stories in the book is Bruno Pfister in Swiss Life. And he was the CFO of Swiss Life. He knew exactly what happens in the business. He stepped into the role of the CEO, very confident that he knows what the business requires. And then the crisis of 2008 hit, which meant the environment changed and the company got into a situation of crisis. And he was seeking advice from a mentor. His mentor told him, think about the legacy that you want to leave in the business. And he was thinking, what? I mean, everything is crumbling. I need to think of legacy. I need to just get things going. And that was a great example of that insight where at the beginning he tried to ignore that. But at some point he realized, actually, it's important. Let me step back and think about what my vision is for the business and realize that entrepreneurship and empowerment is going to make much more difference. So that was step one. It wasn't the end of his story. He then still thought that as the person, the CFO, the person that knows how to run most functions of the business, of course you want to empower people, but I need to be in the details. And that didn't work either, because if you insist to be in the details, you're slowing down your organization rather than speeding it up. And when his management pushed back at the beginning, he didn't want to listen. And it was another example where at some point he went into a room, had a conversation with himself, and he said, well, what happens if I admit that I'm wrong? And realize that the one thing that is probably going to happen is that his ego may be bruised, but other than that, nothing is going to happen. He came out of that conversation with self, admitted to his managers that maybe his path was not the right path, and they really changed how they're running the place. And that was the start of all of them, to your point, unleashing together to be able to recover as a business. So listening to a mentor, listening to your management team, understanding the different vantage points are actually, in some cases, the key.